We are halfway through the spring split, and so it is time to do some power rankings, JNT. On top of that, we have to talk about how TSM is worse than CLG. I will get more on that later because I have to apologize. And also, we got to talk about 100T because they are not the team I thought they were even just a week ago. It's amazing what can happen over the span of one super week. Blue J, JNT 250, doing episode 75 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. JNT, how was your weekend? This is first weekend in a long weekend that we actually didn't watch the games together.
Yeah, you were gone, so it's your fault, not my fault.
Yes, 'twas my fault.
But it was good. The co-streams were back. I really enjoyed watching the co-streams. Like from my recollection of, and maybe it's just because we haven't had the co-streams for so long. That's why I thought it was so good. But like, I just remember like everything that like I was just super invested in watching it. Like, I thought like Double Lift Medios and Sneaky, like whatever they were talking about at the time was like super relevant. I remember they told some funny stories, especially on Friday. Like, it was just a good time. Like.
Damn, man. I didn't watch all the co-streams because it's a long story why, but I was back and forth on co-streams. I think only on Saturday I watched the co-streams. But nonetheless, like you watch them and you're like, damn, I kind of missed this. But I've said this before, like I still like the main broadcast a lot as well. So for me, it's not the end of the world. Should we just get into the power rankings? What do you want to do? Let's get her going.
Sure.
All right. I don't know what order we're doing this in, so you're gonna have to lead the show on that one.
Well, we'll throw them up now. We'll do a quick little rundown for the audio only people. I'll just say how it is.
I like how when we do this, I get to see yours at the same time. I'm like learning as the audience is learning as well. Because for those that don't know, I pretty much just submit mine to JNT, and then we do the show. And then I kind of learn as so I'm as observant as you guys are. JNT, take it away and let the listeners know what we got.
So starting off, my list, 1 through 10, is as follows. Team Liquid, Cloud9, EG, 100T'S, Golden Guardians, FlyQuest, Dignitas, Immortals, CLG, DSM. And the Blue Jay list is as follows, 1 to 10. TL, C9, Golden Guardians, 100T'S, EG, FlyQuest, Immortals, Dignitas, CLG, and TSM. So, the big standouts, obviously, well, I guess the big standouts
There's a lot of standouts, honestly.
Golden Guardians, top 5 in both of our lists. You have them as 3, which when I saw that, I was quite surprised about.
I'm gonna get ahead of this now, man. Everyone from 3 to like 8, I think could beat each other. I guess Dignitas, maybe 3 to 7, I would say. Like I did not feel good about putting any team 3. I really didn't. And I will remind people that this is right now. Like this is if I were to take these teams to beat one another, I would do it in this order. Of course, you could always go like there's upsets and whatnot that you would maybe like, oh, I feel like this is an upset, blah blah blah. But right now, I think Golden Guardians is better than 100T'S and EG. Do I expect that to be the case at the end of the split? No, I don't. But right now
faith.
I do.
Come on, bro. Your GGS boys, you're letting them down.
The thing is, they're all my boys, and I know that's such a boring freaking take, but I actually like all these teams. So what can I say, man? I gotta let down my boys one way or another.
I know you're wearing the EG jersey. You put them at 5. I put them at 3.
Oh, guys, I know there's some people that are just listening, but I got the new EG jersey. I fucking love this jersey, man. I love it.
Come on, show it off a little bit here.
Well, yeah. I'll stand like a little bit. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely love it. But not enough to put them 3rd. So I got them 5th, I guess. But honestly, the thing is, I think all those teams are so freaking close that it's like I said, I do not feel good about putting any team 3rd. So what the hell? Here we go. I'll get all aboard the GGS hype. And if anything of like my former power rankings, if my former power rankings say anything, it just pretty much means that GGS is about to fall off a fucking cliff, as some people are expecting to happen anyways. Because I did have Dig 4 at the start of the split.
I have them at 8.
And then, what's that? Sorry?
And how they're 8 on your list.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, just expect that anybody I start to give some faith to, just expect them to fall off a cliff, and you can maybe use that to your advantage if you're a betting man or woman.
Okay, well, I say we start at the top because I think it's a pretty unanimous decision here that Team Liquid's number 1. What I will say, though, is if Obviously, CoreJJ was out for this past weekend with personal matters, and you know that he's coming back for next week. But I will get ahead of this and say, if Ayla was going to be in for TL for the foreseeable future, I would have put Cloud9 above Team Liquid.
Okay,
And
that's
even
fair.
even though Team Liquid beat Cloud9 in that week 2 matchup, I believe it was, that was LS's last week of coaching the team. It was the Blabber Karthus jungle where he messed up a lot of his ults, and Cloud9 got a little bit too horny at the enemy blue buff and kind of threw the game. I thought, Cloud9 did lose that game, but it was Cloud9's game to lose at that point. I think there was a lot of individual mistakes in that game, which caused the game to sort of slip out of Cloud9's grasp. But, we know that CoreJJ is going to come back into this roster. We saw how awesome CoreJJ was in week 3 when he finally did come back and was literally just like popping off. We were talking about how OP as Tom Kench was looking. Nautilus game as well was like just so much pressure in lane. This team with CoreJJ on its roster does kind of feel unstoppable. And I think when you size them up against Cloud9, Winsome looks like the weakest player on Cloud9 by a large margin. And if you're going to tell me that, CoreJJ is going to be laning against a Winsome, and then, like, sure, Cloud9 has, like, the Beast ADC and Berserker, like, Winsome is, like, a big hole in that roster.
That's a pretty fair way of looking at it. I like that as well. I did not know what you were. I actually thought there was a good chance you would have C9 number one ahead of TL. But to your point, Core JJ was an absolute beast last week. And if it wasn't Core JJ, it would be difficult to be like, we know he's going to be fine. But it's Core JJ, right? You only need one weekend of sample size to know that he's going to be an absolute monster, which he was, and like he has been for, I don't know,
For
how long
years.
has his career been now? Yeah, so like that's why it's so easy to have confidence in him. I will still say that I thought Ayla looked good. There were some standout mistakes. Maybe they lost some lanes they wouldn't have if Cord was playing. That's some stuff that like you never really know for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the fact that Cord JJ is coming back quickly, like TL put in the statement, is what makes me comfortable putting them number one, even if they didn't look perfect this weekend.
Yeah, because I think, looking at the CL team, it's the Bwipo and Hansama show. Like, I'll continue to say it week in and week out. Bwipo is the motor of TL, and Hansama is just that late game insurance policy. Sure, he didn't play as well this week. This sort of, you can say it was an off week for TL. They still went 2-1. They did lose to Golden Guardians. That was like a pretty weird game. Kind of looking from the outside in. And they even talked about on the co-streams, like Bjergsen was on the Twisted Fate that game. That's been a very, very highly prioritized ban, especially on red side, in the meta right now, because a lot of teams view TF as this really OP champion. Just can start perma roaming once he hits level 6. And he's very strong for that reason. But in that game, Bjergsen didn't use Twisted Fate 14 minutes into the game. And I understand it's not as simple as that. There are things, outside of your lane that you can control and how the map is sort of set up for you to make your own plays. But when you're playing a champion like Twisted Fate and you're not making any plays until 15 minutes into the game, it does sort of feel like something has gone a bit awry in your game plan there. And I think, that game was more a lot about Golden Guardians playing super, super well. Everyone will point to that Ablaze Olive 1v3 on the rise at that sort of dragon fight where Golden Guardians initially gets a pick onto TL. God, I keep saying TSM because of Bjergsen. But Golden Guardians gets a pick onto TL, and TL comes back and wipes 4 players, and then you just have a Blaze Olive in the drag pit, like casually 1v3ing and kind of ends up turning the game. But TL is still really good. Like, don't let one loss deceive you. This team is OP.
I think it's interesting that you point out the TF thing because that's something I actually didn't notice. I didn't notice that it took them that long, and I think that you can give some credit to Golden Guardians just because we know their early games have been so good. You pointed out how like it looked like they were going to throw, and like that we've seen that so many times with Golden Guardians. But the fact that they were able to hold on against TL is a really good sign for them. To your point, though, I don't think TL looked the best that they have this weekend, but we surely expect them to bounce back. The only time that I think Bjergsen stood out as looking really good this weekend was the game against TSM, which is like it's against TSM.
Yeah.
Uh, he's playing against Kaiduo, and like he's playing a Zillion, which we always say he shouldn't get a Zillion. And he has Prio all day long against what was it, Silas? I think it
Silas, yeah.
was. Yeah, and like before 7 minutes, Bjergsen is top and bot with roams affecting both lanes, either getting kills or flashes. And so that was a game where I was like, okay, Bjergsen's kind of being a beast right now, and that's difficult to do on Zillion. But also it was against Kaiduo, so I'm like, eh. like I don't really know what to take from that. You know, I need to see it against other teams before I am like, yes, let's go Bjergsen. We're seeing the old Bjergsen back again.
Yeah, I guess I'm still waiting for that iconic Bjergsen moment where he just will straight up 1v9 the game. Before I really, put my 100% faith in the roster. I would say I'm like 90% of the way there, and I think that's mainly off the back of how well Bwipo and Hansama are playing, and with the knowledge of how much of a beast Core JJ is, him coming back into the league is also going to be a plus for
Yeah.
them. And I just think it's because their bot lane is just so much better than any other bot lane in the league with Core JJ in. I know we want to talk about Epi and Huhi, how they, last year were the best bot in the league.
We'll get to
And
them.
yeah, rightfully so, they were, but like you take that FBI Hui from last year and stack that up against Han Sama and Core JJ, I just don't even give them a chance. Like, not a
Yeah,
chance.
no, I think you're 100% right. And that's the scary thing is that we're seeing Hansama pop off without Core JJ yet. Once that guy has like leads in every lane, you're going to see him be an absolute monster. Nothing really else for me to add. The team's good, and I think everyone knows it.
Mm.
Okay, let's go Cloud9 now. So Cloud9, let me start this way with you because I thought that there was a chance you had them number one. What is it that they're missing for you to not put them number one? Is it more of a well TL just takes it, or is there something that like you look at and you point at that and you're like, that's why I couldn't put Cloud9 number one?
I did sort of allude to it a little bit earlier with the fact that I just don't think that Winsome is up to the same level as the rest of the team.
Okay.
I don't think
Anything else?
well, I would say I don't think I'm completely ready to sort of die on that hill, saying like Winsome's the problem with this team. They need a different support if they want to be that number one team, because I do think their bot lane just in general has had some problems. We talk about this quite a lot on the episode last week, because over those past couple of weeks we'd seen a consistent problem of Cloud9 getting Dove early onto the game, and again, whether that's poor wave management, whether that's poor communication, whether it's whatever you want to talk about, it's a problem. And that's not exclusive to Winsome, so I'm not completely ready to say that this guy's the problem and he needs to be removed. But I do think that it kind of is more of the situation. Like, I don't like EL just has it. Like, I can't really put C9 above them. I think
Hmm.
the only reasoning that could make me want to put them above TL is if they had beat them and if they hadn't lost to that game against CLG. And even if that's the case, even if Cloud9 was 9-0 and TL was sitting at like 6-3 or 7-2, whatever they would be, with Core JJ in that roster, I still think TL is better. Like, as much as I want my bias to like put Cloud9 number one, I just can't, because I know how good this TL roster is.
So the only other thing that I thought you might bring up was Blabber this weekend. Not that he was awful, but there was the one game where we saw some classic Blabber ints on the Heckram. There was the one team fight against 100T'S, which ended up going Cloud9's way, right? There is that like where they're fighting over Herald and Blabber just insta dies. I was like, yeah, I kind of expected him to die there. I did not expect the fight to get turned around, but like that to me was like Blabber going in way too early. And then there was like the ultimate over the wall for the Aurelia that he sees basing, but like there's no real follow up. Like there's a couple moments where I'm like, oh Blabber, and like, oh classic Blabber, and like that's totally fine. You're going to get those, but I don't like it to. I'm okay with being picky if I'm holding someone back from taking the number one spot. Like I realize that's being really picky with Blabber because he does a lot for this team. But I'm okay with being picky when we're talking about why a team isn't number one spot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, on the same sort of topic there, like if we want to talk about Blabber having like a little bit of a sketchy performance this weekend, we also got to talk about Summit and how he just completely shit stomped 3 games in a row this weekend.
Yeah, he
He
did.
he just absolutely dumpstered Fake God. He dumpstered Someday in lane. He was kind of dying first in team fights, but that was kind of like 100 Thieves was like sending 3 people to kill some in fights, while Cloud9 was cleaning up the other side. And then Kumo, like, oh my god, that Jace game against FlyQuest. Oh my god, like what do I even say here? Like, he was 1v9 the game. Like,
So I'm going to foreshadow something that we're going to talk about later. But I think this weekend pushed Summit into the MVP talks because he was that dominant this weekend. And I know some people will say recency bias, and sure, maybe. I don't think so though, because I think he's been good most of the year. I just thought he was great this weekend. And yeah, I think he probably was the best player this weekend, honestly. So he's definitely in the MVP talks now with how he's gotten better because he did have a little bit of a slow start. Not that he was costing C9 games, but like he wasn't playing the was he is now. And I think this weekend he really solidified like, hey, like I am good and I'm gonna smash these kids.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
we saw some of that.
we will revisit this topic later. There will
Yes,
be
yes,
more
yes.
summit talk.
Yeah. Anything else on Cloud9?
Um, I guess we've seen a bit of a different fudge in
Mm-hmm.
comparison to LS days with your Soraka mid, your Ivern mid. Fudge has kind of been back on the more traditional mages. He had a really good game on the Ari against
Yep.
Dignitas. I think we kind of saw the strength of that pick there, mainly because both from watching this champion in competitive and like playing with and against it, and just like myself playing the game, this champion just kind of has infinite prio. I think it also has like that added safety of her ultimate and kind of it being on a low cooldown with those extra charges that you get on takedown resets. And it kind of just feels like, obviously, it's not the same, but it feels like old Akali where your R1 wasn't bound to you have to click an enemy champion. You can just press it and you'll R like you can just getting ganked, you just press R and go backwards and escape. And it feels like Ari's kind of in that same spot where she can play almost as aggressive as she wants in lane. You get the wave push to trade aggressively, but come level 6, you pretty much can't touch her. You have to really time your setups well where Ari's not going to have ult and you have some hard CC so you can lock that champion down. Because it just feels like once the champion hits, level 9 and it gets max points on Q, which is like a primary wave clear, this champ is just constantly either roaming to a side lane or getting vision in the enemy jungle. And it just feels like a really oppressive champion to play against when, your team's ahead and the enemy team's behind.
Yeah. So two quick things. One, I want you to confirm this for me. I think this was on the co-stream. Was Meteos and Doublift talking about why or how Ari doesn't do enough damage? Was that them
Yeah, they were kind of
this
saying
weekend?
they were saying that like back when Power of Evil or whatever was picking Ari like in the summer of 2021. And
Okay. Oh, sorry.
oh, well, I don't know. I was just going to say
Finish your
like
thought.
it doesn't I don't think she needs to be dealing a lot of damage because
That's
she
what I
is
was
kind of a
going to say.
CC bot with like the charm and the Everfrost, but like when ahead, she's just a fed like AP carry. And when you
Yeah.
even if it's not Ari, like if you take a fed Syndra, a fed Orianna, a fed whatever, you give them a death cap, a void staff, and a mythic item, like they're gonna one shot you. Doesn't matter who you are.
For me, I don't think the damage matters that off. I think they're sort of right on the damage, but I don't think it matters that much just with how much mobility you get out of the champion with her ultimate and the wave clear like you mentioned. So like I think the champion is actually just good for that because you can chain the active name
Everfrost.
Everfrost with the charm. I think that's kind of OP. So I think that's one of the things that you get out of Ari right now. But anyways, back to the Fudge thing. I thought he looked good this weekend, and I think
His Rise
as
game
like
against 100T was sick.
like he's quietly turning into a mid laner, and it's only been like a couple of months, right? Like he is still on that good trajectory that we saw last year, which is a really good sign. I will remind people that he had a terrible start last year and just got better and better as the year went on. And so while you can't copy and paste what happened last year to this year as far as an improvement trajectory, you can say that there's a good chance of it. And so I would say that that's just another plus in Cloud9's box, if you will. And maybe by the end of the split, maybe we do have Cloud9 number one. I wouldn't be surprised by that, and I don't think you would either. Okay, next up. I don't know if we're going off mine or off yours.
Uh,
This is where I say you got to lead the show here.
Want to do Golden Guardians next because you had them at
Okay.
3, I had them at 5. But I will admit, I have no problem with you putting them at number 3 or making the argument for them being number 3 because Golden Guardians' biggest strength right now is their early game. Their early games are great.
Yes.
We've been saying
No
this
doubt.
we've been saying this for the last 2 weeks, even before this past weekend.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to reiterate it. These teams that have very strong early games but then struggle to close out games, I have more faith in their future. And I felt like this week we finally saw like they got their early game leads. There was some potential pushback in the mid game, but then they had some very clean late games. That game against Team Liquid, they got an early game lead. They met some resistance, in the mid game and closed it out really cleanly off the back of some really nice plays. And I think things are looking up for this Golden Guardians roster, mainly because I think kind of like the unsung heroes of their team so far have been Lost and Ole. Their bot
Mhm.
lane has been like quietly really, really good. I think during the first couple of weeks, a lot of people wanted to point towards, Blaze Olive and Pride Stalker. Rightfully so, because they were playing very well. Pride Stalker has a sort of unique champion pool in the LCS that nobody else is doing, with the Kiana pick, with the Zed pick, with the AD Hecarim, as opposed to sort of the tank Hecarim, which we're seeing right now. But their bot lane has just been playing so much better these last couple of weeks. They're solo killing Hansama and Ayla. Obviously, it's not Hansama Core JJ, so like let's not like put all the eggs in the Ole and Lost basket here, but like that's still good. Like solo killing Hansama, who's like one of the best laners in the league right now. Ayla's still solid. Like they're looking good.
I'll give you my reasonings for why I put them 3. So again, I know I said this at the start of the show, but I'm going to reiterate. I do not think they are as good as a third place team would be. And that's more because I think like the 3 through 7, maybe 8 are all kind of 5s, if you will. But the reason why I put them third best in the league is there's some problems that they had before that they are shoring up. You just mentioned how their late games are getting better. That's one. The other thing too is Blaze Olive was getting caught in side lanes a fair bit in the first couple of weeks. That has slowed down. That's two. The other thing that you also just mentioned is their bot lanes are actually their bot lane is winning lanes. That's 3. That's another improvement. The fourth, and I think this one is a little bit. I'm a little bit hesitant because I'm not ready to say it for sure yet, but I'll say what I'm trying to say anyway. I think we're starting to see Licorice play some carry stuff. Do I think he's good enough for it? Not yet, because he's for so long he's just played like the weak side and just played the I'm going to pick blind or pick Gnar blind and just slowly cruise. I don't think that's the best way to play the game. And there's finally putting him on like the Aurelia. Do I think his Aurelia game was that great? Not really, honestly. I don't. But I do think that that's something that you need to have to be a good top laner in this league. And they're finally putting some faith in him to branch out into other things. That's something else that I think you really need to do, especially if you want to compete with your summits, your somedays, and your Bwippos. That's something you have to be able to whip out is an Aurelia or a Jace. The game that they picked Aurelia, I think they should have picked Jace, but that's neither here nor there. But anyways, all of those things are good signs to me, and that's why I push them ahead of some of the others, even if I don't necessarily think they are a top 3 skill wise. I do think they're the third best team at the moment right now. I know that's a really weird wording, but yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess to sort of, I'll piggyback off that. The main reason why I put them at 5 as opposed to higher up, is because I'm a little bit tentative to push them into that top 4 range, and I didn't want to sort of let recency bias like play a huge factor into this because we look at some of their previous matches and sure, early on in the split, like they had some really tough losses. Like first week, they lost to Cloud9, who was playing the Enchanter mid. They lost to FlyQuest, who was playing the Enchanter Smite top. But even between then and now, like they've had some pretty ugly games in the middle where they have gotten like worked pretty hard. Like even this week, got manhandled by EG on Saturday's game. I'm kind of like viewing them as like the FlyQuest from last week, where I like the direction this team is going in, but I feel like I still need to see a couple more games before I definitively put them in that top 4. Although like I really like the trajectory that they're on right now. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree. My God, though, man, we're already talking about FlyQuest. We're not even there yet. I'm already so fucking sad. Oh, jeez. One last thing that I did forget to mention as well was one of the issues that we saw at the start of the split with Ole was like he was very premature in a lot of his engages with like no one in the world that is able to follow up on some of these recon engages or whatever it may be. And I think we're seeing less of that as well. That was the one other thing that I forgot to add to my list of why I think GGS is looking better. You mentioned the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is important to highlight, is the damage build for the Hecarim on Pride Stalker. That to me is just such a Pride Stalker kind of thing. Like you can clearly tell that his style is I'm going to carry the game. I'm going to be a carry. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And I hope we continue to see that because I don't think you want to change a player like Pride Stalker. You have that guy with the killer instinct. Use that as a weapon. Don't suppress that, if you will.
yeah, he seems like the closer 2.0 on Golden Guardians.
Yeah.
He wants to be the carry, and he seems to be good on these carry champions. I don't know if he's a Lee Sin player, but if we see Lee Sin come back into the meta, I would hope that's a champion that he's good at because that's like a pretty good carry jungler that also is usually a very strong pick in the meta.
Yeah, I don't want to see him on Udyr.
Oh god.
Stop that. Bring back the Zed or bed, man. I thought we were gonna see so much more Zed than we are. I really did.
Played
Uh
2 games of it.
I
He
know,
got his
and
monies in.
I know, but the one game was also against the Smite top, and so like he was constantly being invaded, and so we didn't get a full taste of it. Anyways, I still want more of it because I think he'll probably be a beast on it. But anyways, I had them. I had Golden Guardians 3. You had them 5. Are we ready to move on to 100 Thieves now that we both
Well,
had number 4?
I was gonna
Or am I?
say we'll
Go
do
for it.
EG next because I
Okay.
had them at 3, you had them at 5,
Okay.
and people might be wondering, JNT, why the fuck are you putting a 4 and 5 team as the number 3 team? And yes, I think this team's record does not really reflect where they're at. I think they had a very strong lock-in tournament, and that was kind of a reason why a lot of people got behind this EG team because Jojo Pune was popping off like he said he was going to pop off in all of his sort of pre-tournament trash talk and whatnot in interviews until the finals where he got absolutely shit on after trash talking Bjergsen. But it did seem that we kind of saw Jojo Pune and Inspired kind of crash back down to earth a little bit in sort of weeks 1 and 2 after the lock-in tournament, where they did look like EG's strongest players. But most recently, I do think we've sort of gotten EG back on track to what their sort of team identity is supposed to be, with them playing heavily around Danny and Vulcan in the bot lane. Vulcan and Danny, I think, are a really strong bot lane in this league right now, and I do think Inspired is he sort of leveled out his performances to where he was doing everything in lock-in tournament, and then it felt like he was doing nothing in weeks 1 and 2 and being very passive. And now I think we found that very balanced middle ground where he's able to support all of his lanes simultaneously, and we're not seeing like the game get exploded through one lane, and he's just doing a good job of balancing the team out. And I just think the individual players on this team are just too good to not have them at the very least in the top 4. And it's it's just kind of a process of elimination. Like, well, I don't think they're as good as C9 or TL, but I do think they're better than 100 Thieves. So they're kind of my de facto 3, despite their
Yeah.
record.
So when I was doing my 3, 4, and 5, I had all 3 of those Golden Guardians, 100 Thieves, and EG. I kept moving them around as well. So I don't think it's like you said. With you're not upset seeing Golden Guardians 3rd on my list. I'm not upset with seeing EG 3rd on yours because this team is like. Well, you kind of mentioned it when you're talking about um Inspired specifically. His season has been a roller coaster. Really high highs in lock-in, really low lows in week 1 and 2, and now he's starting to come back again. His Lee Sin game was great this weekend against FlyQuest. He had some really nice picks. I even think of the one play on mid against Tukui where he makes the classic Lee Sin ward hop kick play. Like it's a classic play, but I mean, and even though it's been done a million times, it was pretty clean. He led the dive bot lane to get them ahead. So he's starting to look a lot better and have a lot more impact on the map than we saw the early on in the split as well. So that's good. The other thing too is I think Danny's starting to look a lot better as well. We've always known that Danny is that guy he's going to be really aggressive and kind of pop off. We're seeing it more, especially this past weekend. That's probably the best sign I think for me from Evil Geniuses that was able for that. That's what made me, I guess, be able to bump them up into the top 5. Whereas like maybe if we asked me last week, I would have had them like 7 or 8 or something. I'm not sure. I don't really know.
I don't know if I'd have them that low, but I don't think I would have had them at
I guess
3.
I guess I wouldn't have had them that low. I guess that's just where they were in the standings. Honestly, they were
Yeah.
8 in the standings, but regardless, seeing Danny absolutely pop off is a really good sign. He's playing like the Danny style that you want to see.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and address the elephant in the room because yes, did lose to CLG on Sunday. They were
I was going next.
I had them 3-0 in my predictions going into that, and I was like, okay, boom, easy 3-0. We're gonna beat CLG. Like EG's on the 3-0, they're on the come up. Yeah, they kind of dropped a fat dookie. But I want to say something because Double have said this on the co-streams, and I honestly think he's 100% right. Was that EG just forgot about Zeri? Like they forgot that champion exists. Super weird draft where it felt like it was the first time in forever where we saw Jinx and Aphelios hit the ban list and not be kind of like your first pick Jinx for Aphelios trade, which is what we're heavily seeing right now in pro play. Like you take Jinx, we take Aphelios, or if we want Aphelios, we'll take Aphelios and you take Jinx. And that was like the first time that we saw that. We didn't see that, sorry. Both Jinx and Aphelios were banned. And then also there were more AD bans that were thrown out. CLG banned Jhin and EG banned
Caitlyn?
Yeah, it was Caitlyn.
Yeah.
And then, Zeri got first picked. And Kind of felt like they just forgot that that champion existed because DLG got the Zeri, and the only reason they won that game was because of Zeri. DLG, yeah, they got ahead, and like they probably should have won that game earlier than they did. But like, and you could really tell like CLG was doing their best job to int that game away to EG.
I'm going to play devil's advocate because I do think you're right, but to the defense of whoever's drafting, first of all, let me just get this out on the table. It was a huge draft gap. Like when I saw Camille Gallio into 3 melee champions and you got Zeri Yumi, I was like, wow, this is actually a game that they could actually lose. Like EG could somehow lose this game now. Whereas going into the before draft, I didn't think that was going to happen. But the reason why I want to play devil's advocate is because EG had a lead into this comp, like a significant lead. And even though Zeri is absolutely broken, there was a lot of trolling that they were doing that ended up throwing those leads away, and then Zeri got out of hand, right? So just to play devil's advocate, like they still could have won that game despite the fact that it was a huge draft gap.
Yeah, I don't know. It like Zeri sort of feels like this sort of ticking time bomb kind of champion. I wouldn't say Cassidon because it's not like a Cassidon or a Kale because it's not like you hit a certain threshold and it's just like okay, like you've now won the game or like play correctly, you've won the game because Zeri is still like you're at a very high risk of just getting instantly blown up because you are an ADC. You don't have as much defensive tools as you would an AP mid laner, or like an AP top laner with like Zanyas and whatever. But at the same time, like you were mentioning how it was such a huge draft gap. Like they have Zeri into these like super short ranged melee champions. Like Ryze is naturally a very short range champion, Kai'Sa a very short range ADC, and then 3 other melees, and you have that Camille Gallio. So despite CLG being behind, I was kind of in the same boat that Doublelift and Meteos were on the co-stream when they were saying like CLG's like still in a fine spot despite them being down like 4K or whatever it was. Like it was 4 or 5K that they were down. And they were saying like as long as Zeri just kind of like hits the critical mass, like they're gonna win still.
It was brutal, to watch.
Yeah,
Like
it
it was
was.
like, oh my god, that it was hard to watch because I mean that happens all the time with a new champion, especially early on when like there hasn't been enough patches to balance that shit out, and you just see it. Like it happened with Viego. You remember seeing all the Viego resets. It happened with Aphelios with the 200 years. It happens with all these freaking champions. It happens all the time. And so, but it was just like that same feeling that it always happens with. It just gets worse and worse every time we see it again with a new champion. It was just like, here we go. Like you just knew it was coming, especially when he got the 1,000 gold shutdown off killing the Tryndamere. Yeah, that's where you knew the game was
When
over.
a champion's been nerfed 3 times in a row and it's still at 52.5% win rate, the champion's fucked up. So
Last thing I want to say on EG, like more points in their favor, if you will, is I actually thought Impact had a really good weekend. He played the Akali. That was into the Gwen though, which I mean, I don't think the Gwen should have been blinded that way. That we don't need to go through the whole draft. But then he had a really nice 1v2, which one he was able to trade the kill, but also allowed his team to go 4-man dive bot. So he also not only did he trade 1-for-1 when he's being 1v2'd, he allowed his team. He pulled enough pressure that they can make a play on the other end, and basically the game was just in their favor. That was the FlyQuest game, and then even the game that they lost on the Tryndamere, who was really really ahead. So you got to give credit there because he was absolutely smashing Jenkins on the Camille there too. So Impact looking pretty damn good.
yeah, I don't know. Despite being 4-5, I have confidence in this team, and maybe that's misplaced confidence.
I
But
don't think so. I think most people still have confidence in the team. You also have to remember a lot of their losses weren't like blowout losses. That's the other thing too, is like I maybe I'm just being an EG apologist or whatever, but I didn't think that their losses were like absolutely terrible. Mind you, like there were some. I'm trying to remember all of them now. But I didn't
I
like
got shit on by
even when they were
C9.
losing, even when they were losing, I think that there was a lot of teams that were like, or a lot of people that were like, well, like I don't know, like not the worst games, especially the C9 one, like you mentioned. Like they could have won that game, honestly. That was for those that don't remember, I believe that was the Ivern one. Was it the Ivern or the Soraka one? Where they
That
had a
was
huge lead and then Jojo Pyun didn't use his prio to rotate over to drag. I actually, man, I feel like you were. I remember these games from a long time ago.
that was the Soraka game where Blabber got uber fed on Olaf. That was the game where they got
Okay.
shit on.
Yeah, but the thing, no, I didn't think they were shit on. They were winning the early game really hard, and then Jojo didn't rotate with his pry over to the dragon, which he definitely could have. Anyways, we're going way far back here.
I guess. Well, I mean, I guess some it was like
To me,
side
that
lane,
game
but
was like I could totally have seen a world where EG won that game, but that was maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. You wanna move on to 100 Thieves now?
yep, we both had 100T at 4. It feels like a very I don't know, like an uncertain 4 cuz this team, they're struggling right now. I think the first thing we got to go to is Abadage is turned into a bit of a dirty inter.
Okay, so
Last
I
3
was going to
weeks.
ask because we have in the title what's 100 Thieves' biggest problem. Is your answer then Abadage, I'm guessing?
Yeah, he's turned into a bit of an inter.
Yeah, honestly, he's looked really bad. And the thing is, this was the first weekend that I heard someone on broadcast actually mention that. I think it was Jat that was talking about it. But you and I have said it for the last how long now?
3 weeks.
Um, yeah, there was 1 week where I remember saying like, okay, he's starting to look better, and then last week he didn't look that great again, and then this week was the same thing. He is not playing up to his standards or the standard that you would expect out of Abadage, and this feels like, and it probably is, the third or fourth time that we've said this. How like do I think this guy's a good player? Yes. Should he be playing better? Yes. But how much longer do we have to wait before we see him start to pull his own weight? Because like we are seeing some really, really weird plays, whether it be bad or lazy rotations getting picked off. This weekend we saw him just die randomly to a level 5 Victor.
Yeah,
He
that
tried to
was
stay
like
in a tower. He walked like, dude.
that was a cherry
I've
on
seen
top.
I've seen gold players that know that they shouldn't die there and they should back off. That was really, really strange. And the only explanation that I have is like something is out of sorts, and I don't even know what that thing is. I have no idea what's going on with Abadage.
Yeah, and apart from Abadage, for the people who listened to Hotline League this week, I was on the show and I kind of talked about how I think 100T their their individual players aren't as dominant as they were in summer, and I think that's mainly because we're seeing a lot better performances and better players in the LCS right now in comparison to what we saw in summer. And I do also think that 100 Thieves, they benefited a lot from the kind of drama that Cloud9 and TL had last summer split, where Sven was benched for 4 weeks and Alfari was benched for like 6 weeks in the middle there, and Santorin wasn't playing all their games. And 100 Thieves had, I think, the second best record in the summer regular season. Obviously, I know the records were combined, but if you just look at summer alone, they had either the tied for best or second best, and Cloud9 and TL had like 4 and 5, best records and whatever. So I just think that the individual pieces of 100 Thieves was what made them so strong in summer, and I just think that the rest of the league has gotten a lot better individually, and 100 Thieves team game kind of seeing the holes in it because they don't have these big elites like they used to have in summer.
I was a little bit disappointed that your call was the last one on Hotline because I thought there could have been more discussion around it. Do you want to pull up what your take was word by word while I continue to explain why I disagree with it? While I half disagree with it, I should say.
Up
Because
here right now.
yeah. Anyway,
It was just something along the lines of 100 Thieves struggles are a byproduct of the LCS leveling up rather than their team's internal problems, if there are any. I don't know.
right. Okay. Yeah. And the reason why I half agree with it is because I do believe the LCS has leveled up. That part I agree with. However, I do think that 100 Thieves, I don't think they are playing to the level they were last summer. I think they definitely are playing worse. We just talked about Abadage. That's pretty clear he's playing worse. And then their bot lane as well. And I watched the interview with Travis and Huhi from a few days ago, where Huhi even acknowledges that their bot lane isn't very good right now. And I even noticed they lost, like they were losing lane to TSM's bot lane this weekend. So like that is a sign that like something is not right with 100 Thieves. Um, to me, like that was one of the best areas for them to get leads. Uh, Pretty much all of last year. Like this was, as we mentioned earlier in the show, this used to be the best bot lane in the league. And I don't think they are anymore. And it's not just because Core JJ and Hansama exist. It's because they are playing worse than they were. So I think it's a combination of both, and that's why I like half agree with your take because I do think the team is actually playing worse. The only guy that I think is playing better is obviously Someday. This guy's been an absolute monster. I will throw him into the MVP talks as well. And again, foreshadowing a conversation that we're going to have a little bit later. Someday is definitely MVP candidate.
One thing I will say, further knock 100, I'm really knocking them too much. I just they're playing as well as they used to. Is we saw a different look out of 100 Thieves Cloud9 game where they played to top side as opposed to playing bot side, which is one of the things that we kind of talked about last year with 100 Thieves as to why they might potentially struggle on the world stage. And this was after they had finished as a number 1 seed and was going to Worlds as NA's number 1 seed, was that they're kind of a one-dimensional team with the fact that they very often play for bot side. They love to get first Rift Herald play at bot side. They love to go for the first 2 Drakes. They pretty much play around bot side permanently. And that was like the identity of this team. That's why their bot lane got a whole lot of leads, because they put so much resource into it. And in that game against Cloud9, we saw this very topside focused approach where they gave Summit the counter pick with the Aurelia into the Graves. Closer was playing topside, and like Summit was just like casually outplaying them like 1v2 in the lane. Like Blabber didn't even visit top lane. I think he went once to clean up a kill. That was like maybe around like 7 or 8, 9 minutes where he like ran hella far into like tier 2 tower to pick up a kill and then ran out or something. But other than that, like Summit was basically like 1v2ing top lane with, because Closer was putting so much pressure topside, and you kind of just saw their bot lane crumble with like they didn't get the normal resources that they do, and like Cloud9 just like took over the game. So
So I looked at it a little bit differently. Sorry to cut you off. Finish your thought. My bad.
but I'm just a bit worried again now. Like, dude, like, can this team only play to bot side? Like, what happens when their bot lane
I
doesn't get
didn't.
resources? Like, that's the thing.
I didn't look at top lane the same way as you did. I actually thought that there was a chance that Someday could have taken over that game in the top lane with the Aurelia pick. However, as he ended up getting Graves' flash, and then I thought there was a chance he could punish that flash being down. But then when that happened, that's when the Rift Herald fiasco happened, and that's when I thought that Summit was able to get his lead was after that fight. And so I was like, I really would have wished I could have seen how that top lane would have unraveled, because you have 2 of the best top laners going off against each other. I didn't think that Summit was like stand ahead better than Someday in that particular game. I thought I got derailed by the Rift Herald fight where there was a fiesta because um, Closer decided to stick on blue buff rather than finishing the Herald. The team was split. Do we go for this? Do we invade this blue buff? Do we continue to fight Herald? And it was like the team just got so caught up that like Cloud9 just ended up punishing them for trying to, for having or for going for too much at once when like they just hard greeted. That's the way I looked at that game, anyways.
I think either way, like, even if that trade goes in your favor, top lane is 100 Thieves favored. Like, their bot lane is still getting smacked around. So
Yeah,
I think that would definitely would have created a much more even game. And like you said, like the game definitely plays out differently from there. But at the same time, like with their bot lane not playing as well as they were last summer, and them not getting the resources in that game, you could really see them struggling, and that's kind of a problem.
yeah. There was also like a lot of times FBI's like rotations to fights were really slow. Like maybe he's playing a little too safe, where like again that same fight over by the Rift Herald, which to me is where the game was decided, which is why I keep bringing it up so often. FBI takes a really long path, and like that's kind of bad for your Jinx to not be there, especially when C9 members get out with like 1 health. Like so that was something where it's like to me that was where the game was decided, and it was actually a really close fight. But it shouldn't have been close. It's definitely on 100 Thieves for that fight not going their way. But anyways, I think if FBI gets over there quicker, which he could have, I think the game looks a lot different. Anyways, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say on 100 Thieves. I think the biggest problem for me is definitely Abadage, and a close second is their bot lane is not as good as they used to be. In short,
Well, we got FlyQuest. We both had them at number 6. We did sort of pose the question last week if we thought that where would we rank FlyQuest in, like, are they top 3, top 5, top 6, whatever. I think if I remember correctly, I got them 4. I think.
I don't remember honestly.
I think you might have said like you would put them around 4, and I said I would put them in like the 4 to 5 range, but more on the 5 side than 4.
Yeah,
And
you gave it like a 4.5. I remember
I
this
did.
now.
I did say
Okay.
like a four and
Yeah.
a half, but I would skew towards the 5.
Okay.
And unfortunately for FlyQuest, they did not have the greatest weekends. They lost their game. What did they? They went 0-3. Yeah, they went 0-3.
Oh, they went 0-3. All right.
Yeah, and in pretty much every single game, except for the Cloud9 game, because the Cloud9 game was kind of close, even though it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that close, but it was close. It looked
It was their
close.
best game for
Yeah.
sure. It was their best game.
But they got worked against EG and Immortals. Like it was not close.
I'm so disappointed, not even because they went 0-3, but just because of how good they looked last weekend versus how bad they looked this weekend. To me, like pretty much everyone in the lineup looked worse. The only guy that I thought actually looked decent this weekend was Afromu. What was the game that I think I wrote it down? It was the game against Immortals. He was actually having a really good Thresh game.
Yep.
And his hooks were great. And there were so many times where he was roaming and stopping like the top laner from being dove. And like a lot of times you don't see that stuff when you're watching the games. Like you wouldn't notice that like Afro's backing up here and he's backing up there. However, you know what it felt like? It felt like he was like, I'll use an analogy here. It's like when you're blocking so many punches, but you're not throwing any back. And so it was like he was stopping the other team from getting leads, but FlyQuest wasn't able to get their own. And eventually it just takes one punch kind of thing, like that. Eventually you can't stop Immortals from getting every lead possible. That like even though he blocked so many punches, eventually one got through and then they just fell apart. That's the analogy that I'll use. Even though he actually had a really good game, there was no advantages for them to get anywhere else on the map, and so it didn't matter. That was the problem specifically in that game. And
Thought
then,
that
like I
was
said,
a really good analogy.
yeah. And the other thing that I'll say is that the FlyQuest game, I didn't think they played poorly. I just think their draft kind of sucked. Um, Let me see what they had here. Oh yeah, they left the Zillion open. So you and I have both said many times we like teams picking Zillion. We think it's really good. The other thing that I've said to you many times, and maybe on this podcast, is that I like the Jace Corki into it because it's really difficult to hold the Zillion ulti against that hard poke. It's even hard to team fight, especially when like um that was the game where Jose Diodo was on Udyr, I think. Um, yeah, and the problem is that was their only source of engage. So the problem that you have here is the Udyr can only engage by being, well, obviously he runs really quick, but also you want to use the Zillion speed up for him to get in there. Otherwise, he's just going to get the fuck poked out of him by a Corki and a Jace. And so if you use your speed up, your Zillion speed up on the Udyr, you've kind of screwed yourself because now you can't use it for your Jinx. And I'll remind people that Jace was way, way ahead in this game. That like you also probably had to use your Zillion ult on the Udyr, and now if you're not using that ulti on the Jinx, you're handicapping yourself even more. They really, really needed a better engage tool than the Udyr because running straight at poke is not really the answer. And so that's why I didn't really like that draft. And all it took was Summit just absolutely shitting on Kumo for the game to be over because they had no answer to the poke. The Zillion ulti isn't going to do much against poke. It's a lot better against all in engages.
Yeah, that's sort of why I said this game felt like this game looked like a close game, but I didn't think it was actually a close game because you had this super heavy engage comp from Cloud9 where they want to sort of rain down the poke with the Corki and the Jace, and then when it comes time to team fight, once you've got them down to like 75%, 60% HP, you just dive their shit in with Leona Hecarim, and like you follow that up with the Philios damage and whatever. But 100 or sorry, not 100, FlyQuest had this super kind of like peel disengage comp with like, well, if you're gonna jump on us, well, we have the Braum stuns and slows to stop you. We have the Braum ult to stop you. We have the Jinx traps to stop you. We have the Zillion slow, the bombs, the ult to stop you. Udyr is just like kind of a wall of a champion in team fights because you kind of have to respect him where he can't like run into your whole team and stun your whole team. But like if you dive on top of him, like he's just a super tank. And so it kind of just felt like it was this like FlyQuest couldn't really win the fights unless Cloud9 flubbed all their engages, whiffed, and then dove too far. So it was kind of like
Which they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. Like it did get a little sketchy in the mid game. Like there was like a couple team fights where they went like 2 for 2 in kills on trades, or like even 1 for 1, where like supports would die or jungler would die and support would die in return. But it just felt like it was Cloud9's game to lose for me, that one. So
Yeah,
while I think the
absolutely.
game looked relatively close, I didn't really feel it was close. And kind of like you said, like their draft just like it didn't really do anything. Like it was just like we're gonna pick all these champions that match up very well individually, but when you put all the pieces together, like what the hell does their comp do? It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, the Udyr running at you isn't going to mean anything, especially with how fed the Jace was. And you got Jace and Corky poke. And then you just have the hard engage follow up by Hecarim and Leona. I really, really liked Cloud9's draft. Um, I thought that they were just like, oh yeah, we'll bait these guys into taking Zillion and then we'll shit on them. The other guy that I have to point out is Jose Diodo looked great last week, and then this week he didn't. I
Played
think he just got
Trundle,
hard. I
unfortunately.
think he just yeah. I was just gonna say I think he got hard out jungled by Xerxes. Xerxes was on the Volibear. He was on the Trundle, and he didn't make much of anything happen. Whereas like last week, his Hecarim was so good. So really, really night and day from FlyQuest. I can't look at one bad weekend and put them below 6. That's why, because I'll remind people they were 5-1. They were a team that was winning most of their games. They had one bad weekend, so that's why I'm not pushing them down to 7, 8, or 9. But I mean, 6 is still pretty low considering they were 5-1 a week ago.
Yeah, and I mean, the FlyQuest haters will probably continue to bring up the point that there's a fair argument you could make that, they got 2 quote unquote lucky wins in week 1 running the Smite top. Sure,
Yeah,
who knows? Like, who knows if they didn't run the
they
Smite
might
top?
not be wrong though.
Yeah,
Those haters might not be
exactly.
wrong.
Like,
Yeah.
I think I give more credit to Fly in that situation than say, oh no, fuck that, they were cheesing. So I think, we're still kind of we're on the nicer side of putting them 6, but, this weekend was a bad weekend for FlyQuest. Like,
Yeah.
FlyQuest content this week, it won't be as much focus into. They gotta pick up their game.
And as you may expect, they are getting my Bean Soup Award.
Dang, yeah, that was a
Because
bit bean soupish.
this weekend was Bean Soup for FlyQuest. I'll put my little emote in the chat that I like to there. Absolute nightmare. The copium is that, well, they had a tough weekend. They're playing all these teams that are, on an upward trajectory. EG starting to look better. Immortals is starting to look better. C9 starting to look better. They ran into these teams at the wrong time, man. It's okay. Copium.
Mine is that it was draft gap every game. You just need better
I want to be
drafts.
less sad. So can we talk about someone else now?
Go to Immortals because you had them at 7. I had them at 8.
Okay.
But really, I originally had them 7, but I switched them back down to 8. That was more because Dignitas preferences and Immortals preferences. But
Okay.
similar to EG's situation, I think, like EG, like sure they're 4-5, and their record doesn't look that good, but they're on a really good trajectory. And Immortals, them being 4-5, even though I have them at 8, like I think there is a completely fair argument if you wanted to put this team at like 6, or even if you wanted to put them at 5. Like, I think you can make that argument. I think Immortals is playing much, much better than they once were. Like,
They definitely are.
They started off 0-4 in lock-in. They didn't make it out the group. They started off 0-3, I think, in LCS.
They're another team that's got the upward trajectory right now. Like it's looking good for them.
So like for me,
definitely.
it does feel a bit weird to put them at 8, but I do think this team is sitting in a really good spot. We want to. If I'm gonna touch on my bean soup real quick, I gotta go to that CLG game because oh my god, watching that game live, it was just so painful. Like I want to say, like with all the pauses and the quote unquote bug investigation with the realm warp, it was probably like an hour of just like pausing in one game or something like that. Like I wasn't keeping track, but like God, it was like head like banging against the wall. Like that's how I felt during all these pauses.
Yeah. I was not watching them live, as you are well aware, but I can only imagine what 4 pauses does. And then you end the day early as well. That's the other thing. That's a shitty day of LCS, honestly. That just sucks. Now, the best standout, I know it's weird to be so excited for a team in 7th, or that I have 7th or that you have 8th, but for me there was one thing. The best standout for me this weekend was Power of Evil versus Palafox. Now the only thing is that it's Power of Evil versus fucking Palafox, right? No offense to Palafox, but he is not one of the better mids in the league. But Power of Evil absolutely took over that lane. He was playing very forward the whole time. This was his Orianna into Palafox's Rise.
It's Conqueror Orianna.
He was in his face the whole time, and he was playing very forward. I would be interested to know what his forward percentage was in that particular game, because he was either hitting plates, roaming, and making dives happen somewhere else. Like there was so much pressure. If he was dying, it's because he was trading 1-for-1. Like lots and lots of pressure put out in this game for him, and that's something that we haven't seen so far this year. Normally, and let's be honest, a lot of times in the past, we've seen PoE just kind of chill and hang out in the laning phase, and this was the first time in a long time, I think, that we saw him playing hella aggro on one of his control mages, and I liked seeing that. The only thing is, I need to see it against someone that's not CLG.
Kind of on a similar note, we kind of talked about the strengths of this team going into the split and why this could be the team that like can potentially push into that like top tier of the LCS, that being 5, that being sort of 6, like the 5 to 6 range. If you want to push into that top 5, you obviously got to be number 5. And we kind of spoke about how important Power of Evil and Xerxes were going to be to this team. And I think Xerxes, on a similar note to Power of Evil, is playing a lot better. And he's a lot
Yes.
more noticeable in these games. I thought the Volibear game against FlyQuest, like, picture perfect Volibear game. Like, that's exactly
Yep.
what you want when you pick a champion like Volibear. Like a weird champion that it's like suddenly popping up again. The Chem Tank meta's back. I don't like that. I just think, dude, Chem Tank, like, I just think the champs are bad. Like, what happened to Jarvan? Like, where's that champion? That champion was so good. It didn't
He's
get
banned every game against Dignitas, I can tell you that.
dude, but like, what happened to Jarvan? Like, that champion is still really good. Like, I guess maybe like people don't think
He's
it's
a
as
speak
good.
planet.
But like, what people don't think it's as good because you can't build Sterak's second anymore. Like, dude, just build the Randuins, build a Death Dance, build GA. Like, I don't understand why we're seeing like Udyr, Hecarim, and Volibear. Like, give me back the Lee Sin and the Jarvan. Like, those champs are still good, bro. I don't get it.
I messaged you when we saw Udyr Hecarim again, and I was like, how did we go a full year and
Why I
right
like
back
Pride
to this?
Stalker doing the
What game was
Triforce
that?
Hecarim.
What game was that we were watching? Was that an Immortals game or no?
No,
Am I drifting?
I
I'm
think
drifting off
that
into
was
something
the
else, I think.
Cloud9 FlyQuest game because they were playing Hecarim
Okay.
Udyr. But still, like,
Okay.
Pride Stalker building the Triforce Hecarim. I think Triforce Hecarim is broken.
Mm.
News
The
of
other thing,
Chemtech
too-
meta, but Xerxes, that's like his kind of meta.
I gotta give some props to Revenge. Yeah, okay, so he absolutely stomped on Kumo, which is like everyone did this
Dude,
weekend.
Kumo got exposed hardcore.
He did, man. What a rough
It was
weekend. for
ugly.
Kumo. Okay, no more FlyQuest. Let's talk about how Revenge was looking so good in that game. So first of all, he got huge leads in lane, which I know everyone else did, but he actually used those leads really well and got a lot of flanks off in that game. So more props to him for that. Because a lot of times you'll see Revenge like play okay in lane, and then he can't really translate it to advantages later on. But this was one of those games where we saw him do that, and so got to give props to Revenge for the Camille game.
Yeah, Revenge is actually, doing a lot less inting relative to his lock-in performance and relative to kind of entirety of 2021. So, like I said, like, the main problem with the Mortals is when one person is inting on this team, God, it is really rough. But when you get those games where someone's not inting, like the CLG game, like the FlyQuest game, like, this team looks really good.
Yeah, they could have gone 3-0 this weekend. I mean, they ended up throwing really hard against Golden Guardians.
Yeah.
That was some more being supery, if you will. Destiny's like caught window shopping. He goes for a hook blind into the brush randomly, and then PoE whiffs his shockwave. Like there was then who was it? There's two of them that decide to stick around. Arrow, which by the way he got subbed in. Arrow and Xerxes decided to stick around after they already kind of threw. They stuck around to like get a pick, and then they also ended up dying, which really threw the game back in Golden Guardians' favor because they just gave away Baron at that point. Like that was like, it was another one of those games. Actually, it was kind of similar to the TSM game where it was like they were winning the whole time until they weren't. And so you got to start to wonder if Immortals is going to be one of those teams that just chokes hard. Honestly, that's twice now that they've had games with like pretty firm leads that they just go full choke mode.
I don't go
But
too
I
much.
guess that's why. I guess that's why they're 7th and 8th on our list. I don't know.
Well, you did. I was gonna say I don't have got in there for 2 games. I did say that they didn't really say like Wild Turtle's bench or anything. Like they said before the week that Turtle and Arrow were both going to play games this
Mhm.
weekend. They didn't specifically say whether who was going to play 2, who was going to play 1. But it ended up that Arrow played both games. He looked fine. Like
Yeah.
I think he didn't look like OP or anything, like super noticeable. I guess he was noticeable in the fact that he wasn't inting like Turtle was doing earlier on in the split. But I thought Turtle was playing better in general anyways, in comparison to Lock-In in the first 2 weeks of the season. But who knows? Like maybe we'll kind of see Arrow stick around some more. Seems like at the very minimal, he's like a side grade. So they think there's a chance that this team has a higher ceiling with Arrow on it. Go right ahead. But both of them look fine.
Yep. I don't really have too much more to add.
So we'll go on to Dignitas. I had them at 7. You had them at 8. I'm gonna simply lay out my logic right here, and this is why I had Dig at 7. Even though I think I wanted to
Okay.
put Immortals at 7, and I originally did, but Dignitas has beaten all the teams below them and lost to all the teams above them, except they
Okay.
got an epic win against 100 Thieves on Sunday, which was like, maybe need to rethink this whole Dignitas. Like, they beat all the teams they're supposed to beat, and then they just beat 100 Thieves and looked really good. And River's a
So
god,
then
so
we're calling Dignitas the bar then? Is that what it is? Rather
yeah,
than the top 5, bottom 5, Dignitas is the bar.
yeah,
Okay. We'll try to remember that for future episodes.
yeah.
Dignitas, they are now known as the bar.
But dude,
Uh,
when River gets going though, like this is actually a good team. But that's the problem is like those performances as of late have been few and far between. And I think it's
yes.
also because fake similar to Kumo, like fake gods getting exposed. And like I remember back in Lock-In, I was saying like one of the main things Dig needs game plan is get fake god on a tank utility champion. And we're unfortunately seeing him a lot. We're seeing him a lot of these Graves versus Gnar Hullbreaker matchups, which just seem to be whichever person is the better laner wins no matter what. Like in any of this matchup, like whether you're the Graves or you're the Gnar, you're both building Breaker. Whoever's the better player wins, and Fake God loses it every single time.
I was gonna say, so
So
you're saying Fake God is not the better
yeah,
player,
no,
almost almost regardless of the matchup.
yeah, he just loses it every single time. Which the meta's the meta. Like you can't just suddenly start playing like random tanks because that might screw up. Like okay, well now you're playing a champion that can't get lane priority, and like oh like don't have a strong damage topside if you want to fight around Rift Herald, like whatever it is. But when this guy was on Gragas, like it just felt like he can lose gracefully and have good impact in the mid and late game, whereas he's playing these sort of carry v carry matchups, losing it every single time and just being behind in golden XP to his counterpart and just feeling completely useless.
Fake God was the only one to me this weekend that was comparable to how bad Kumo was. I think between the two of them, it's kind of hard to figure out which one was worse.
He,
Like he was getting bullied the whole weekend,
dude,
right? Like
he got embarrassed by Summit. Like he just like it
he
was
did.
straight up like embarrassing. Like you like oh
Yeah.
no, got
Dude,
styled
he
on under
bullied him the
tower.
whole game. He gave him like, dude, he gave him a wedgie. He gave him put him in a headlock and gave him a noogie. And then he stuffed him in a locker, and then he took his lunch money. He got like the full bully treatment this weekend. He absolutely got crapped on.
I just thought it was
Um,
funny that like if you just look at the KDAs in that game, like Summit was 2, 3, and 4 on Gnar, and like Fudge was 7, 0, 2, and they gave player of the game to Summit just because of how hard he was bullying Fake God. Like I just thought that was
yeah.
funny looking back on it because when you look at the score lines, you're like, oh wow, Fudge must have carried this game, but you watch the replay back and like it literally looked like a challenger player versus a silver player, like no meme.
It did. It did. Honestly, this is where I'm hoping that Champions Queue kind of helps our players kind of step up a little bit. Because I don't think I mentioned this sort of earlier with Licorice. Like you can't just play these blind pick Nars and just hope the lane is gonna go okay. There's with those three top laners, the Summits, the Somedays, and the Bwippos. That's enough teams that like you need to start challenging these lanes because you're just gonna get smoked if you just play passive and let them pick whatever they want into you. Hopefully, Champions Queue can help these players pick their Jaces and not be the NA Jaces and actually get better. I think those are weapons that you need to have, and Fake God does not have it. So there's that. We mentioned how River hadn't looked that great lately, but specifically the Hecarim game against 100 Thieves was like, okay, good. This is the first time that we saw River back to his like I'm popping off kind of thing without the Jarvan. Because he had no problems when he was playing Jarvan. He was shitting on everyone, and we kind of haven't seen it since Jarvan's been permabanned against him. That was really good. And the other player I got to shout out big time was Biofrost. I think Biofrost is still one of the most surprising stories of this season for me specifically. I will remind people that at the start of the split, I did not have faith in Biofrost. I just really didn't, and I think he's probably been their best player overall. It's either him or River. It's kind of close. Higher highs for River, but more consistency out of Biofrost, I would say.
Yep.
There was like he solo killed the Aphelios with the Tom
Oh, that was
Kench.
hilarious.
And then there was like he saw them walk into the brush, but he had like the 3-man Tom Kench knock up. Like those are pretty clutch plays. Just to name a couple, like Biofrost is looking pretty damn good, and God, I'm really happy for him. He's a guy like it's easy to be a fan of Biofrost. You know what I mean? So that there's some good stuff. Even though Fake God is definitely struggling, there's some good coming out of Dignitas. And me having them 8, it's kind of like how I mentioned I don't feel Golden Guardians is a 3 on my list. I mentioned how everyone's a 5. This is kind of the same thing. Whereas like I don't feel like Dignitas is an 8, but someone had to go there, and so I guess it was Dig. I don't know.
And then there were two. Have
Yeah,
our
now got like 50 feet of crap, and then we can get to CLG and TSM. Well, there might be another 50 feet of crap in between them as well, actually.
I would go with the
But
latter on that one.
I think there's like, okay, there's like 25 feet of crap, and then CLG, and then there's like another 50 in TSM. Let me start with this one because I have to just own it, man. I was wrong. I thought TSM would be better than CLG. This just in, they're fucking not. They're just like, oh my god, man. TSM looks really bad, and even though CLG still looks pretty bad, they're not TSM bad. There is a difference. There definitely is.
Yeah, I did. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for being a CLG believer once, and it was right. I got the CLG pick over TSM. I just think that like when
I took
comparing,
CLG in that one.
you didn't TSM.
Yeah, I did. No, I didn't. Yeah, I took CLG. Yeah. You fucking owned me in predictions this week. We'll get to that soon, but I did take CLG though.
Well, I'm gonna burst your bubble here. I forgot to count them up.
That's not a problem.
I
Anyways,
was
sorry,
kind of like
continue.
half counting them up on the side here. But like,
Continue.
oh my god, like it's funny because like I don't feel like I can like I want to say good things about CLG, but they're only good things because we're comparing them to TSM so often now. Like CLG versus
True.
TSM is like that's like the main comparisons we're drawing, and like looking up like straight up looking at CLG versus TSM in that specific game, like, TSM got fucking owned. Like it wasn't even close. But like then when you look at CLG versus the rest of the league, like they're also just like a worse version of the other teams that we're seeing like right above them. Like they're worse than Immortals, they're worse than Dig, they're worse than FlyQuest, like they're worse than all these other teams. Admittedly, they did pick up another solid win against EG this weekend. That was the Zeri game. That was like, we talked a little bit about that game with the draft and everything. But like, while I want to give praise to this team because I think they are playing a lot better than they once were, I think the main person that I actually want to point out, who I don't know if you would agree with, I think Palafox is actually playing kind of well lately. Like I've been somewhat impressed by Palafox relative to his previous performance. He had a pretty not so great year on FlyQuest last year, and coming into this split, I was like, wow, this guy is probably going to be the worst mid in LCS, and I don't think he has been. Not been the worst.
I thought he looked good against TSM. I thought he looked like garbage against Immortals. So I don't know. You can maybe try to even those out. Against EG, he was just playing Galio duty, so it's like I don't really hold him to losing lane as Galio. Like, eh. So I don't know. I guess a so-so weekend specifically. Overall on the year, not so great to be quite honest. I think I have a little bit less faith in him than you do. Um, but yeah, I guess I thought his Silas game against TSM was pretty good. He was the better Hecarim in that
Yeah.
game. He stole the Hecarimar and was a lot more effective with it than Spica was. So I'll give him that. I got a couple of good things to say about CLG before I get to the more criticism, if you will. Jenkins absolutely clapped the Akali. That was against Revenge. He was on the GP, which we've seen him have success with in the past. His GP is definitely one of his better champions. When I think of his good champions, I think of GP and Kennen. Those are like his two bread and butter picks, and he looked pretty good on that. The other one was Luger. Okay, so Luger on the Zeri game, sure, he's playing Zeri. I'm not going to give him too much credit for that. However, the full glass cannon Jinx game that was against TSM, I liked that he went full glass cannon. I noticed he went Kraken, PD, IE, LDR, not necessarily in that order, but well, maybe it was in that order for all I know. That game, I liked that he went full glass cannon because we've been seeing a lot of RFC and Gale Force, but that game, I don't think you needed it. You had the Tom Kench and he was running Cleanse, so I think that's enough protection for him to just go ape shit. And he was dealing so much damage, he was just erasing TSM off the map, and so that was a good little standout for me as well from Luger and CLG.
Yeah, I think.
Should I get? Should,
Oh. Okay.
no, finish your thought. I was gonna say, should I get to the bad stuff now? But finish your
Oh,
thought, and then
well,
I'll get to the bad stuff.
I was
after.
gonna reiterate that like Luger is the best player on this team. He actually does look pretty solid for the most part. Like I think if you put this guy on, like he feels like a, gonna sound like lame for tactical, but he feels like a tactical. I think, you put this guy on like TLC9 or like 100 Thieves or EG, like he would be like serviceable, like wouldn't be like absolutely smurfing on everybody, like wouldn't be losing you the game. Like this is like bad about this guy, but I feel like top 5 player in his role if he was on a good team and had like an OP support.
Yeah, I could see that.
He just
This
looks
is gonna
really good. Like I don't know, his fundamentals seem to be very good. He doesn't get caught out too often. He's like it feels like he's playing lanes out well for the most part. Like I think him and Poom. I don't want to say underrated because it's not like they're better than all these other bot lanes, but it's just like we thought their bot lane was going to be bad, especially because it had Poom in it. But like I also think Poom has been doing like all right. I think the main problems for me with LG in this team are his contracts into the game, and I just think Jenkins is like not very good. I think he's good when he gets his pick, when he gets like GP in a favorable matchup. But other than that, I don't like it.
I think Jenkins has been their second best player. I think it's Luger and then Jenkins. I will remind people that he had one of the first games of the split. He had an absolute sprint, run it down game.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hold that to him. I think most of his games have actually been pretty decent in comparison. So I don't know. I think again, I still think Contracts is still at the level of worst player in the league, despite Contracts looking better. I still think he's there. Even when he is getting some leads, Contracts is kind of just throwing them again. Like he's getting picked off a lot and just giving over the shutdowns right back. Like even when Contracts gets a lead, I don't have faith in him to hold that lead. I fully expect him to give over the shutdown because he plays so aggro all the time, and most of those coin flips are not landing the way he wants them to. So yeah, that's the negative that I have there is that I still have no faith in Contracts, even though he's looking better. Like he has to look better. That's how bad he was looking most of the year. So yeah. TSM?
Yeah. TSM sucks balls. I think Kaido is probably the worst mid in the league.
Man, he looked really bad this week. And the thing is, I wouldn't have thought that like in the first couple of weeks. I actually thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah, I
But
don't
this
know.
weekend I thought he looked awful.
I just like the biggest problem for me with this team still, and I'll continue to mention it, is just Spica's inactivity in the early game. Like he doesn't do anything. He doesn't
Hmm.
do anything, and I like doesn't have the luxury of you know, better players like he did last year. Like I don't think his players were like insane by any metric, like Huni, Power of Evil, Lost, and Sword Art. But I thought they were all solid players, and they were players who weren't going to lose their lanes, and were going to normally have lane push, and therefore you get pretty easy objective control, get the early rifts, get the early drags. That's kind of what we saw TSM turn out to be. Last year was a scale up team fighting team. And the problem now is they just don't have time to scale because Spica is not doing anything. The enemy jungler is doing whatever he wants. Kaido is like losing every lane. So
So yes,
yeah,
Kaido is losing every lane. So there's that.
like
So that
every single lane.
it is more
I
difficult.
don't think he's won a lane. Like he's at
So
a CS deficit like, every time at like 15 minutes.
you'll remember that my criticism of Spica was the same last year, even when he was MVP. Obviously, it's to a much larger degree now than it was last year. But that was my criticism last year was that I didn't think Spica made much happen in the early game specifically. However, he made a lot more happen in the late game when they had leads, which is why to me he was an MVP candidate, but not an MVP, is what I remember saying. This time around, there's no leads for him to be the guy that is absolutely popping off in the late game like he was able to last year. And so that's why you're seeing like this big difference from last year's Spica to this year's is like the early games aren't going well. And it's really hard to look good when the early games are going well in your lanes. The only thing that I thought looked better from TSM this weekend was I said I didn't want them to put Huni on any of the Smite tops or the roaming tops anymore. Now, the only problem is the first game that they did that, they put him on Gwen and they picked Gwen first and they immediately picked Jarvan right after, which was like telling the whole world, hey, this is Gwen top, pick whatever you want into it. And then I think he was countered with Tryndamere, just got shit on. So that was a problem there. The other two games, though, he did actually get leads. So that was, I think he played a Gnar game. I don't remember who he played it into.
Graves of
Uh,
matchup.
Yes, he played it against Jenkins Graves, and the other one I have it written down here somewhere. Oh, he played
The
the Rumble
Rumble.
game.
The Huni
Yeah,
Rumble special.
it just didn't fucking matter. He got like a 10 CSD lead, which is like that's good and all, but that's not enough to win the game, especially against Team Liquid. So yeah, those are like little tiny things to hang on to. That Huni was able to get some leads in lane. You're gonna need more than that to start picking up some dubs.
Yeah. The problem with TSM is since their academy team also bottom of the table. It's not like we have the luxury of saying, "Hey, like let's get some academy players. Like let's get some academy players in there." And let's
No, they
also
did.
like
They
let's
put in
no,
your son.
I was gonna say like let's also not forget like we saw their academy team in lock-in, and their academy team was also pretty dog shit, and that's evident to them being last in academy standings right now. So, I mean, the hope for TSM is that Kaido he pulls off the mask and he's Doinby or something. Like I don't know. Like I honestly think there is no saving grace for this team unless we get some like stark gameplay changes to where we're gonna get Huni on Jace every single game. And then we're gonna actually have Spica play some sort of early game champion and actually do things in the early game and try to win through Huni. Because
It
I
makes
have no faith in their bot lane. I have no faith in their mid lane. The only person I have faith in on the team is Huni.
it makes drafting against them so difficult that the only real threat at the moment is Huni. That's a problem because it's hard for Huni to get these counter picks if the other teams know they don't have to respect the other laners, right? So that's your one strength that you might have is difficult to play around now. So that's that's a really big problem that they're facing as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. We could talk more about Kaiduo. He pretty much just conceded the lane to Bjergsen and Zillion, let Bjergsen roam all over the place, make plays. He TP'd to the turret mid when it's already dying, and there's like a Thresh sitting right there and a Zillion. So obviously he just got hooked into double bomb and just died. Um, yeah, I don't know much more to say about TSM. They definitely do look like the worst team in the league. I think that's become pretty apparent. Um, I guess one thing to talk about with TSM is how long are they going to wait, because there's all these memes about Reggie selling his house
Mhm.
to make sure they don't become the next CLG. And while I do think that that actually is true, I do think Reggie would spend a lot of money to make sure it's like, when does that spending start? Because I would not be surprised if they are already considering looking to find other players. Like maybe they've already offered it Jensen. I don't know. I'm pure speculation here. Maybe they've already offered to a guy like Jensen or Niski or whatever it is, because it's looking pretty apparent that this lineup isn't going to work. Um, yes, it's only 9 games, but those 9 games you picked up 1 win and you probably should have lost it. So yeah.
Yeah, like that's the main problem is you can't look back on these games and even point to like a single thing where you're like, oh wow, like TSM's actually doing this really well, and like maybe we need some more of that, or like actually had leads in this game, but they just missed. Like, oh no, they're getting shit on every single game, or they're just not doing anything and therefore getting shit on, or they got gifted that one win against Immortals because Immortals played their team fighting like shit.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
There's there's going to be some changes in TSM. I think that's fair to say. It's a matter of when, I think, not if. Um, if you
much.
were to guess, Jinter, when would you say? Would you say before the end of the split, or would you say mid-split? You see TSM go to sign a bunch of new players. When do you think
Well,
that?
I don't think they're going to sign anybody mid split. I do think that, Takeover is their mid laner, correct? I think he's going to get in at some point. Like, he's got to. Like, Kaido is just fucking dog shit.
The thing is, I
But
won't be surprised if they do it mid-split. Just, I'm not even saying they should, but the reason why I wouldn't be surprised if they do it mid-split is because maybe you're thinking you don't. Let's say you're planning on signing Jensen, and I'm not saying they are. I'm just going to use Jensen as an example.
I don't think
Let's say
Jensen would join the team.
so that's a problem. That's definitely a big problem. But let's say he is, right. Just hear me out here. If you want to go after Jensen, and for some reason Jensen is interested and he wants to ruin his career, let's say, wouldn't you want to start that process now before having Jensen, who's been off for months and months and months, go into summer split fresh? Rather, you would try to get him some reps before the end of the split so that he could go into, or do you think that it would be like, no, I don't want to bring Jensen into what is like a negative environment where you're just losing all the time, and have him tilted before going into summer? And again, it doesn't have to be Jensen. It could be Niski. It could be, well, there's a bunch of mid laners that are teamless, like Jizuke and all that.
Yeah.
What do you think is the thought process there of, if you can bring someone in, when would you want to do it if you're Reggie?
I think it's more likely that you would probably wait until the actual off season to where you have some sort of stability and you know what your roster might actually look like come summer split. Because I do think like you're 100% right. Like he could come in the middle of the split, like they could still continue to get shit on, and like he could just lose faith in the process right then and there. Just be like, oh
Hmm.
fuck, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, and now he's like in this negative environment and he's not having a good time. But there's also the argument that the longer you leave him on the shelf, the longer it will take him to get back to his own. Like there's both sides of the argument. Um, I guess for me, honestly, I'm with you. I say wait till summer. Because I don't think you want. I think the worst thing you could do is bring someone into just a garbage environment and here go play and feed them to the wolves, kind of Demonte style on CLG last year. That didn't really help him whatsoever, and that could be a career killer, honestly. And like you said, who says Jensen even wants to go to TSM? Who says Niski wants to go to like
Dude,
TSM does have
Niski's stream
money,
is like popping off, so he's kind of
right?
seeming like he's going streamer mode.
And that's what my next point was going to be: is TSM does have money, but guess what? Jizuke, Niski, and Jensen also already have money, and so if they see a situation where like they're not sure that they're going to be on a good team, maybe they decline and play the waiting game, assuming they still want to play pro. That is.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that wraps it up for the power rankings. TSM dead last. Now,
Yeah.
we highlighted or we hinted at this, foreshadowing, whatever you want to call it, a few times throughout the episode. There are 3 top laners right now that are looking pretty damn good. You probably know who they are, but for the sake of just spitting it out, it's Someday, Summit, and Bwipo. And I think right now all 3 of them can be considered for MVP. I guess first of all, J&T, would you say there is anybody else that should be thrown into the MVP talk? So let's start with that.
Who's not a top laner?
Yeah, just anyone in the league.
Ooh. Uh,
Because for me, I think it is these 3.
Berserker?
I would have considered. So I personally wouldn't have Berserker there.
I think he's been really good.
Karthus.
I don't know. Well, everyone has a bad game.
I know. But anyways,
Someone had a bad game. You got to show them by Impact Trendamere.
I personally wouldn't have Berserker. I wouldn't have River. I would, because River was like popping off and then he kind of fell off a little bit. There's no one else that I could think that really goes into that conversation, which then brought up the question in my mind is like, which one of these 3 top laners is the best one right now, or who has been the best this season, rather?
Want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
It's Bwipo by a smidge.
And by a smidge.
Just
by a
only
nose.
A smidge. And
is Bwipo a horse?
I say
Bwipo
that,
by the nose.
I say that because I just think Bwipo has been a little bit more consistent than both Someday and Summit. But I do think that Someday and Summit have had, these more pop-off games where like they're just like absolutely taking over the game. They're completely styling on their opponent in lane 1v1. Whereas Bwipo just seemed to have integrated so well into this TL team with, it feels like whenever Santorin ganks top, there's a kill on top. And I think, partially you have to benefit Bwipo in some ways for being able to communicate that this is a gankable lane, knowing they have no vision, controlling the wave where it's in a benefited state for yourself and your team to be able to pull off ganks. And then he's just like team fighting so well. Like to point out that game against Summit where Bwipo was playing Gragas and Summit was playing Aatrox. Like sure, Summit was winning the lane and Summit was up like 25 CS. He almost solo killed him on like 2 separate occasions. But when it came to like, playing the role, like Bwipo, when team fighting came around, was just like super impactful with landing like flashy combos, like big casks to knock priority targets into the backline. Like I just think that like Bwipo has been way more consistent throughout the entire split. Summit I think is on the uptick in terms of like if he can continue these like really dominant performances, I think Summit could overtake him. And I think that only makes the next TL and C9 matchup that much more interesting. Because that'll probably be the game where people say, like, okay, this guy is the best top lane in the LCS. That's what it feels like. And I'm going to quickly touch on Someday. I would put him about like 4 smidges behind Summit, where I think he's been playing really, really good, but I just don't think he's on that level of Bwipo and Summit.
Who do you think is my pick for the 3?
Bwipo?
It is actually Someday. I actually think Someday. So this is the way I looked at it, and this is really weird to say because I do think the other 2 have been also consistent. I actually think he's been the most consistent one, however, though. I would put Bwipo as the best at the start of the split. I would put Summit the best as of recent, and I would say Someday has kind of been number 2 the whole way along, but still like being really, really close to number 1. And so that's why overall it's like, it's weird to say that he's been more consistent with how consistent the other 2 have been. But to me, I still think Sunday's just been an absolute monster. And the other thing too is like I thought that he's looked really, really good in games where his team is looking really, really bad, which is difficult to do. And I know you could still make that argument as well for the other two. To me, for Someday, it's just a little bit more. And I figured that would actually surprise you that I put Someday ahead of them. But for me right now, I think Someday is the MVP halfway through the split.
Wow.
Um,
That
but to your
is
point, yeah, that shocks you, eh?
yeah.
I knew you would be surprised by this. I knew you would be. To me, though, you make the point that like it is so close. I wouldn't be upset if anyone took either one of these three. And I know that's like a boring take to say, but it's true. These guys are styling on people. So, anyways, my pick is Someday right now. I really hope the race kind of continues to be this close because I think it's interesting right now that it's all three top laners for me, anyways. If anyone thinks that we're forgetting anyone to throw into the MVP conversation, please let us know in the comments because there might be someone that I'm
Berserker.
forgetting. I, yeah, maybe for me,
If I
no,
had to pick
but
MVP, I'd pick Berserker.
Berserker had really
Yeah.
interesting.
He
Interesting. He
other
has
than
had some
his
absolute pop off games. Let's
other
be
than
honest.
his
His
card
Aphelios has
this
been
game, his like pretty flawless, like
pretty disgusting. I'll give you that. That's for
kind of
sure.
a beast.
Hmm. I don't
It's
know.
close though. Like I wouldn't say anyone is like the front runner by a long margin.
Yeah, no, and I think that's pretty obvious.
My
But
my
anyways,
metric
interesting.
of my metric is smidges close.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Let's get into some LCS drama recap because there's been a lot happening over the last like week or two now, and we're slowly learning new things. I'll let you take it away on this one.
Yeah, well, obviously, we found out about the LS dismissal during the games the previous week on Saturday, and then everyone was kind of awaiting, Monday, Tuesday for when Cloud9 was going to release a video basically kind of outlining why they made this move because the majority of the community was like, what the fuck's going on? Like, we were looking like the best team or the second best team and we're getting rid of LS. Like, what the fuck? So I think it was on Tuesday when they released the video. It was about a 3-minute video with, I think they had Jack and Fudge on it, or it was Jack, Max, and Fudge, or it was like cut
They
between
had
two of the.
Blabber as well.
Yeah, I think
They had three guys. They had Blabber, Summit, and Max.
really Jack wasn't on there at all. I feel
No,
like they were
Jack was
cut.
as well.
I think
Jack was with those
I
three.
think they were cutting between people, weren't they? Or I don't know. But either way, I don't remember what the video like who was there. But the point being was that the issues that they cited in the video was sort of coaching discrepancies, and I think a lot of people kind of got up in arms really quickly and was like really quick to jump on like the Cloud9 hate train because everyone was saying like, well, why would you bring in LS to Cloud9 if you know he's going to play these unconventional drafts, whatever, and then you're going to get rid of him when they start playing these unconventional drafts. And to me, I don't think that was it. I think, LS has also been very vocal about a bunch of other things when it comes to practice. And by practice, I mean not what you are practicing, but how you are practicing. And LS has been very vocal that he doesn't find that there's a lot of value in scrimming other teams, rather play 1v1s and scrim your academy team. And if I were to go out on a hunch here, I would say that it was probably more along the lines of LS and how he runs the practices as opposed to what he was actually, the drafts and whatnot that everyone seemed to sort of get all up in arms about. Obviously, like this is just pure speculation. Like everyone who's watching this knows as much as I do, but when I heard the term like coaching, like they didn't see eye to eye on the style of coaching that Ellis was doing, that's how I saw it relative to how the rest of the community saw it.
I think you just highlighted to me the problem with that video is that you even just said yourself, like, I'm just going off on a hunch, which is like, that's what's frustrating to the community is that they made it a video to announce what happened and didn't really say what happened. And so we're all still left on all of these different hunches. And maybe there's a totally good reason as to why they can't say something. Me personally, I don't know if this is a really popular take. I feel like there's a lot of people that might disagree with me. But for me, if you can't say, I would rather them just say, we can't say, I'm sorry. And not kind of, it feels like, and maybe they're not, but it feels like they're kind of just sugarcoating it by saying like we had different coaching philosophies. Maybe that is it. Maybe they did just have different coaching philosophies. I obviously don't know. But it felt like there was an announcement video where nothing got announced. That's what it felt like. And I think that's why a lot of people are like, well, what the hell, man? We waited all this time for that? Like that's what we were. That's the announcement video that you were looking to that you were waiting to make.
Yeah.
And so it's like it feels like there has to be something more. And I think that's why a lot of people are upset. But maybe that is it. Maybe what they said is literally the extent of the reason why they let him go. They just had different coaching philosophies. XD. It
Yeah.
just feels wrong though, doesn't it? It doesn't it feel like there's more, or
Well,
am
yeah,
I alone in this?
it's kind of like another situation where it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because when a big move happens in esports, everyone wants to know why. Like, oh my god, like what happened? But at
Mhm.
the same time, the organizations themselves, they can't like go out and reveal everything. So if they go out and don't make a video because they don't want to reveal anything, it's like, holy fuck, like you guys aren't being transparent, you're not telling us anything. But if you do, it's just like, oh, we wanted more. Like that's what you felt after watching that Cloud9 video. It's like, oh, you wanted more. You wanted to know more details about this. And they probably can't, talk about it too much. I think
You know,
another like reason why people got all concerned about this was because LS like beef quickly was back in Korea and did this sort of stream where he was kind of talking about his experiences on Cloud9, and the main thing that like got like snip tooled and was posted everywhere on Twitter and Reddit was that like he said can't talk about any of this stuff because lawyers are handling it. And then everyone's like, that is like, oh my god, like what the fuck happened with this shit? Like he must have done something really, really bad, or like Cloud9 is like doing something like really wrong with their treatment of LS and whatnot. And
yeah. You hear lawyer and you're
just
like,
like where
someone fucked up. Either
we've
Cloud9 did or LS did. It's like who
we've
fucked
gone
up
further
if
down the
lawyers
rabbit
are getting
hole.
involved. Yeah. The other thing that I want to add is that like I think there was also a PR overload. So like there's some Cloud9 fans that only care about Cloud9 and some TSM fans that only care about TSM. But then there's a lot of fans that are just invested in the league, and you got these PR statements from Dominic on Hotline League followed up by Cloud9 with just obviously another PR statement. And it was just like maybe there's just some fans that are so invested in the league and care about both that like they just
Bofa.
got that PR overload and we're just like, I've had enough. You guys aren't telling me shit and I'm mad now. And I'm going to take to the internet because that's what people do. So maybe that's part of it as well. But from the takeaways of LS's stream, I think the two things that stood out to me the most were one, obviously the lawyer, which is like, oh, what the fuck does that mean? And two, the fact that he's not going to coach ever again is like,
In an
damn.
official setting, he said like he
Yeah, exactly. But that's what matters though. And the official setting is like where you're held accountable. And that's why this season was so crazy. He's been coaching in the past, right? There's a reason why this year was like this moment that everyone was so excited for and why everyone was so invested in the league is because like now it really mattered. And we got, like I mentioned last week, we got a little taste and then it was done for. So it's like, and it looks like we're not going to ever get that
Daj.
again. Yeah.
Pour one out for our boy LS.
Yeah.
Just to that.
Where are we going next?
We'll flip over to TSM stuff because it wouldn't be the LCS without talking about TSM for an unnecessary amount of time.
Especially in a drama recap, it has to be TSM involved in a drama recap.
Yeah, it's even surprising that we didn't start off with TSM, but LS takes precedent. But just I think the obvious thing that people were talking about this weekend was the tweet that Spica put out. Do you have it up right now? I don't have it up.
I do.
Okay,
I will read it.
Read it out for us, please.
People have read it 1,000 times, so they're going to hear it once more. He says, the narrative has gotten out of hand. No one on the team was against Shen Yi shot calling. In fact, when he first told us after 0-4, we all agreed. No player played a part in deciding his benching, and it was not anything gameplay related. I wish my only job was to jungle. Now, I don't know about you, JNT, but for me, I had two questions when I read that. One is Spica frustrated with having to be the translator on the team, or two, the one that I actually think is he frustrated with having to be the PR team by having to send that tweet out himself? That's what I got from that is like he's like, dude, I just want to jungle. I don't want to be the one that has to write out this tweet to set the narrative straight. Like someone else do this. Am I alone there?
Yeah, like I think, when we talk about what we were just saying with Cloud9, like it's either you come out with a video and say whatever you need to say, but then fans will still resent you because you didn't say enough. Or you're kind of in the TSM situation where you don't really say anything and you just post a little text picture on Twitter saying, oh, we're benching Jenny, here's your son. And like, sure, they can say whatever they want about communication. And unfortunately for Spica, there's just been like a lot of out of context clips and tweets and stream clips and everything where he's kind of like memeing Shenyi, which is kind of like pouring more fuel to the fire for all the TSM haters. Whether it's because you want to see TSM crash and burn, or you genuinely hate what happened to like Shenyi and you think that like Speak is in the wrong. And for him, it's probably frustrating. He's probably getting a bunch of replies on his tweets, probably getting a bunch of hateful DMs. Like, God, I still don't know why people like go out of their way to like randomly send hate to somebody they don't even know, like in a DM on Twitter. But like it is partially on TSM's fault that like Spica has to, kind of carry the brunt of this mistake that is TSM. So
That's the impression that I got is like when I read "I wish my only job is the jungle," I'm like, honestly, I can't blame him for that. And I also want to paint a picture of the frustration that Spica's having right now because obviously everyone knows they're losing right now, and that's going to lead to a lot of frustration. But I want to go further back and just remind people that he was MVP just in summer last year. Now go back to then and think there's no way he expects to be in the spot he is now. Bjergsen left TSM. Everyone left TSM for that matter, and he's the only motherfucker that got caught behind in this absolute trash can of a team. And so that's where I think the frustration really lies with not just losing, but the fact that he's the only one that got stuck or got held back from going to a better team. Because maybe, and again, pure speculation, but maybe he wanted to go somewhere else after he found out Bjergsen wasn't going to be there, and now Parth is leaving, and everyone's leaving, and there's the investigation with Reggie into whatchamacallit, into the abuse stuff. I feel like there's got to be more built up frustration than just losing. I feel like it extends beyond that.
yeah, and I mean when you're losing, it can feel like you're drowning. So it's not, Spica's probably he's never been in that situation in his LCS career at all, and neither has TSM. So they're probably all like panicking a little bit because they don't know what to do because they're having all these questions thrown at them. They have to balance the narratives that are being spread online about their team and about their players, and then they also have to be constantly fixing all the problems with regards to their team and players. Probably feeling like they got to juggle a bunch of balls but don't got enough hands. Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
I
then
feel a bit bad for Spica despite him playing like absolute dog shit.
yeah, no, I so do I. So do I.
Because like
Because
at the
that's a
same
pretty
time,
heavy
like
fall.
I do like people have like been kind of defending Spica and like, oh, it's okay, like it's not your fault. Like I don't know, dude, like you're playing like shit. So I feel
Yeah,
bad
he's
for
playing
him.
pretty
I
bad,
feel bad for
but
him as a person, but I don't have any added empathy because like he's Spica. You know what I mean?
yeah. I don't know. For me, like it's easy to be a fan of Spica just because he's like a fun meme kind of player. Like he's got that good personality that you love, so it's easy to be a fan of him. And I think that's another reason why people are so quick to defend. He's just a likable person. There's nothing wrong with wanting to defend likable people, you know.
Yep.
So there's that. Also, we learned this weekend, or maybe we knew this before, but I certainly didn't. That Parth wasn't really the one that wanted this roster from what Lena had put in Twitch chat. Shall I go ahead and read that, Jinter?
Go ahead.
Lena wrote, Parth and I both wanted to re-sign Soren. When that didn't happen, I wanted to go for Jensen, Doublelift/Falcon. I was told that that's not worth the cost, and I left right after the offseason ended. This current iteration of the roster isn't what Parth wanted. He was just doing his job. So, now you gotta ask the question, well, who the fuck wanted this roster? Is it just Reggie? like,
Yeah, like
Parth was the GM, right? I'm not crazy?
well, that's exactly the thing. Is like, well, we talked last week about this new guy TSM Dominic, who's like VP of esports, but he only joined the
He
team.
wasn't there.
He only
He
joined the
told us
team in
many times.
December. But I mean, even if he said that, like, like he wasn't there, so like he didn't
Yeah,
build the roster. So like,
right.
unless like the real Slim Shady stands up and says like, "Oh, I built the roster," like, sorry Reggie, but you built the roster, bro. Like,
Well, there's two guys. There's two possibilities. One is Reggie. The other one is Chowie, right? Is there anyone else that maybe?
I mean, I guess Chowie, but there's no way that like if Reggie didn't think the roster was good, like he would have like vetoed Chowie insta. So you got to think that Reggie played a massive part in the construction of the roster.
And that's one of the other things where the fans are probably frustrated. It's like you can't even figure out who the hell built the roster. Like no one's gonna own up to who built the roster. Like that's a weird thing to do. Again, we go back to Hotline League last week when TSM Dominic was on. You couldn't ask him anything. He didn't answer anything. You couldn't even say like who's making the player moves, like who benched Shenyi or whatever. So I don't know. Really, really weird scenario.
Well, to defend TSM Dominic a little bit, because Travis did, he made that
Mhm.
video kind of immediately after his Speak His tweet came out. And, Travis was kind of out, he was out there defending TSM Dominic quite a lot, because he was kind of mentioning, we've kind of heard, I wouldn't even call it rumors, but we've heard a few stories in the past about how TSM is really not a good org to work with from media perspective in terms of getting, authorization to interview players, to do content with players, etc. And that this TSM Dominic guy is actually like trying to repair some of those burnt bridges with the various media outlets, and other people who interact with their players who aren't within the TSM organization. So, guy similar to what I was talking about before, he's got a lot on his plate, and you add a bunch of losing to that, and a bunch of questions, and a bunch of angry people with pitchforks, and it makes your job infinitely more difficult.
It does, and I guess that's honestly I should be a little bit more fair to him because he is new on the job. But I mean, even if you're new to the job, like you should be able to do the job to answer some questions. Like you should know who. I don't know. To me, I think you should know who's making the roster decisions if you're the VP of esports or whatever he is. Uh, Someone's like, come on, man. I don't know. Maybe I'm asking too much. But anyways, you mentioned the Travis video. That video was really interesting. Highly recommend people go and watch that.
It was good.
Um,
Listen,
I don't even remember all of it. I'll have to go back and rewatch it myself. But the one thing that stood out, and I told you I before even watching it, I fully expected Travis to say that like he kind of um God, I don't want to be misquoting because it's been some time since I watched it. But basically, I expected him to say that like TSM for a long time has just kind of relied on winning and didn't really do much to like build up their brand by like reaching out to media and stuff like that. And of course, Travis has said this many, many times, but like it just feels like now is the time where you're seeing it all really cost them now that they can't like you shouldn't ever be able to just rely on winning, but they did for quite some time, and now they clearly cannot rely on winning.
yeah, they were just kind of taking things for granted because they were the draw, they were the LCS, and their brand was built on winning. And unfortunately, you're not winning, and now you see where they are. Like, even if you take a look at a team like Cloud9, like up until their sort of resurgence in like season 10, where they won spring and they had that really insane season. Sure, they didn't make World season 10. They came back and won spring and season 11, the perks and everything. Like, Cloud9 hadn't won for so long, yet they still were like the front runner in LCS along with TSM and TL, despite not winning any championships when TSM and TL were kind of going back and forth before TL went on like their 4 championships in a row. So like that's just further proof how like winning doesn't have to be your brand. Like Cloud9 is like the living embodiment of you don't have to win. Like you got to be competitive. Like being competitive is
Mhm.
obviously your number one factor, but like a brand and like I guess their brand is being like kind of just like memeing.
Memers,
Yeah,
yep.
like it goes a long way, and you can see that stick despite Cloud9's major roster turnover throughout the years, because started out with the OG roster of balls, Medio, Sneaky, High Elimination, and there's been so many players from then until now. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's a good point. It is a good point to point to the other orgs that have had success and seen what they've done to build fan bases without just winning every time. It's totally fair to do. The other thing is, and I didn't know this. The last thing before we move on is Shenyi is going home. Did you hear about this? I only
No,
heard about this on Hotline League tonight, and I was like, wait, what?
yeah, I had never heard anything about this. Apparently, he's like just not going to come back to the LCS team, because once he's done his required academy games, like since they're not making playoffs, he's just going back to China. I don't even know if that like Travis was saying that like that's permanent, like he's not going to come back to TSM, or he's like not going to rejoin the team until summer. But I think either way, this guy is probably played his last games for TSM.
That's what I think as well. I think he's probably just going to finish off academy. But like the thing is, when he was being placed into academy, I still had full expectation that he would be back at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Um,
weird. I mean,
Fu-
admittedly, we don't really know what we're talking about here. Like, we just heard it on Hotline League for the first
yeah,
time, so
it's
I don't
kind of
know.
like shock because it's like just it's like I guess it shouldn't be shock though. It just seems like every week there's something new that's added on to this TSM disaster. And I mean, eventually it should come to an end. But I will say, JNT, even though I still disagree, I'm still hanging on. They are becoming more and more like CLG every
Dude,
fucking week.
we are currently living in that timeline. It has already
I
happened. We are in the
I
end game. We are in the
I
end
will
game.
I
Like,
will iterate why,
GG.
because people will be like, they are CLG right now. Why don't you think that? I will reiterate that the difference between CLG and TSM is that TSM will always have money to spend. And so therefore, I don't know if it's going to be in the middle of this split or next year, but eventually you can build back a really good
They
roster. Whereas
supposedly
I
paid
don't think
$5
CLG
million
has ever been
on
able
their
to do
league team
that.
this
I
year.
know.
Jesus
That
fucking Christ. So
that
yikes.
is that is yikes. That is
Fly
yikes. But
the combination of Golden Guardians, FlyQuest, and like CLG probably spent $5 million on their like league rosters. Maybe even throw Dig in. That is embarrassing, dude. Like that. It's just such
they
a.
are definitely on the CLG trajectory.
It's just
I
such a
will totally
yikes.
admit that. I will totally admit that. However, I need to remind people that CLG has like a long history of just being absolute dead weight since like what 2019, and even before that, they had a bunch of bad splits as well. Where it's like TSM finishes 10th for one split. That's not necessarily CLG. CLG for me is like split after split after split after split. You are just dog water, and we haven't seen that out of TSM yet. So
I'm getting
that's why
depressed.
I don't that's why I don't think we're there yet. But I will totally admit that they are well on their way if this were to continue for the
Too
next,
much
I don't know,
CLG
3
and
splits or
TSM
whatever.
talk. I'm fucking dying inside. We gotta move on.
Okay,
I'm gonna
let's
lose
get
my
to the
brain.
predictions.
Okay,
Okay.
predictions. I will admit these are the records on screen are a little bit impromptu. Mainly because I didn't actually like these aren't like I've officially checked them.
We'll go back and check them.
I'm
I thought
these are
I
either the correct ones or I'm up one.
That's what
So
I was going to say. I think you're up one because you had a really good week on me. But anyways, we'll figure that out later. Let's get her going into the predictions for this week coming up. First game on Saturday, we have Immortals and Evil Geniuses. Based off our power rankings, we have to take EG.
yes, I'm taking EG as well.
Okay. Next up, TSM and FlyQuest. FlyQuest. No
FlyQuest.
explanation needed.
Yep.
100 Thieves Team Liquid.
Well, Core JJ is playing, so Team Liquid. It's quite
Team
obvious.
Liquid. I think I'd be taking them if CoreJJ wasn't playing. Cloud9 and Golden Guardians. This one, I know you're going C9, and I think I'm going C9 too. I want it's like I almost feel like I need to justify that I put Golden Guardians third, but like nah, man, it's especially with how much better Summit's looking right now. That's the other thing with this matchup too, is like I don't think Licorice is there yet, even though I'm happy he's starting to play some of these other picks. I don't think he can go toe to toe with Summit, and I think this will be with how much he likes to pick the blind Gnar, and maybe it's not him, maybe it's Golden Guardians that likes to pick Gnar blind. I think that will get absolutely destroyed by either Aurelia or Jace or the Camille. Like there's too many bans needed, and they love to pick it blind. So that's a big Monka-esque Cloud9 over Golden Guardian.
Next up, Dig versus CLG. Stick with Dig. It's gonna be a river gap for Dignitas.
Dignitas.
TL versus IMT. Team Liquid. I don't think I'm. It's funny because I think unless C9 versus TL recap, I'm probably just gonna pick TL to win every game from now until the end of split.
Okay, Team Liquid, and then CLG versus 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves.
Yep. EG versus Cloud9. This does kind of feel like a prove it game for EG if they want to kind of put their stamp back on the league. EG 3 at Cloud9 and lock in, but you know Cloud9 did beat EG in the first round robin. I'm still gonna roll with Cloud9 on this one.
Me too.
Unless I see some drastic like oh no moments from Cloud9 and epic moments from EG on Saturday. I don't think anything's changing there. Next up, FlyQuest versus Dignitas. I'm going Dignitas on this one.
I will go FlyQuest.
Okay.
Yeah, baby.
And then last up, we have Golden Guardians versus TSM.
Golden Guardians.
I'm getting like a telepathic message from the timeline, and I think TSM's supposed to win this one because the timeline says so.
Are you taking TSM?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll just take TSM.
Wow.
Just for fun.
Okay.
Honestly, it's just for fun.
Gotta give props to JNT for taking TSM.
They gotta.
On that
They.
one.
I know TSM sucks and like they suck, but like they gotta win a game at some point. Like they're not like just gonna lose every game. They gotta win one at some point.
What are the odds you chicken out before the game starts?
Oh, very possible. Like 80%. Oh, like 80%.
What the fuck's the okay? All right, that's fine. I can't blame you if you switch up TSM. All right, let's move on. We got some quick news.
Yeah, a wee little bit. First off, there was a Reddit post that came out today about the LCS viewership and how it's really terrible. I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole on this one, but I did want to throw out some very scary numbers that are a little bit shocking. LCS Spring 2022 is down 45% in comparison to Spring 2021 and down 37% compared to Summer 2021. That is really bad.
That is a lot.
Keep in mind, obviously, I think Spring had a big boost in viewership, especially early on, due to Alfari and Perks coming to the region and joining CNNCL, and both of those teams having a lot of hype around them. Not to say that a lot of the rosters right now don't have a lot of hype around them, but like these are two prolific European players that came over and joined. And at the same time, I'll point out the obvious, like the co-streams have not been around. Like we had co-streams for lock-in. We had them last week for Super Week, but you know, these fans of a Double Lift, a Dominate, an LS, a Sneaky, and Meteos, who otherwise wouldn't watch LCS, like they're not watching LCS because like they don't give a fuck. Like they watch it
I
because they
don't
want to see
think.
their favorite commentator talk about it, their favorite streamer talk about it. And I would have to imagine like I'm gonna go on out a limb here and say like 15% of that is because of the co-streams.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think that they make up for the whole difference. I think you also need to point to LS being there and then just being gone. Like that's what the most hype was built around this year. Most of the hype was built around them, and then you had Core JJ that couldn't play for quite some time, and then what else? Then you had EG that was supposed to be a great team, and they kind of had a
TSM is
slow
dog
start.
shit.
TSM is yeah, so there's a lot of contributing factors, but it's still not good.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say, which is obvious, but it's oh.
Yeah. On a more positive note, there was a very interesting upcomer article that kind of talked about some off-season moves that almost happened, or players that were considered for other teams. And if you read that, I honestly just like it's not really something that you have to go and read, but it's just fun to sort of like see like, oh wow, like this roster could have been this. And we each picked out one thing we found interesting from the article. I'll lead off with it. One thing I thought was interesting was that Summit was potentially going to be on Fnatic when they realized that Alfari and they weren't going to get Alfari and Perks and that they were going to Vitality, because I thought like the only reason that Summit was being considered mainly by Cloud9 in the first place was because of LS's influence and like him hyping up the players so much. So I was kind of surprised to hear that, ooh, another team was also interested.
Yeah, like he may have been on the move regardless of LS. And
Yeah.
honestly, let's be honest, because of LS is probably why he's in North America right now. Because if LS isn't there, I feel like he's probably not either.
Yeah,
And so,
he's at least an LCK, if not EU, I guess.
conspiracy theory. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Nope.
Jack just got LS just to get the Koreans and then dipped on them.
Oh. Maybe,
Do
I
I
don't know.
actually believe that? Do I actually believe that? No, but it's fun to throw that out there, isn't it?
I guess.
The one that stood out to me was Rogue Patrick, because as you know, JNT, I'm a really big Patrick fan. One of the reasons why I cheer for XL, but like Rogue is freaking good, and I think he's better than Comp. And so I would have liked to have seen what that looked like, but I also would have been really sad that XL would have lost him. So
XL's
whatever.
popping off, dude. They're what, like 8-6, 8-5 or
Let's
something?
go. I don't know. I didn't watch day 2 yet, so I don't know. I'm glad you're not sure what the record is because I still have to catch up on the second day of the European games. I didn't have time this weekend.
Okay.
Oh, the other one that was kind of interesting was TSM Reckless and Treats. But there was like I feel like the Reckless one was put to bed pretty quick in the off season, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Like
like
there was like
when the
talking
rumors
about
came
TSM
out.
Reckless, but it sounded like that was like no, that's not happening. Like we learned that pretty early, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Um, Next up, speaking of XL, they're signing Kadrill once again. Oh wait, not
let's
as a
go.
jungler, as a content creator. Um,
Uh,
I can't
I
even
love
think.
it.
I can't even think of an XL person. Like I don't even know who's on XL on any other esport. Who's not the league team?
Oh yeah, me neither.
Like
Who
what is
cares?
like who like on this org? Like
I don't know. But Cadrill is, and Cadrill's a beast.
is
Fucking love
like
Cadrill.
great.
Yeah. What else?
Next up, Renata Glask is enabled next week.
Oh yeah, more new champions. This will be fun and not busted.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think the champion's that good. I don't know. Maybe just me, but
I hope you're right, but how often, man? How many times do we hear that? Like the champion's not that good, and then next thing you know, they're like perma. So,
Yeah. I just went on XL's website. They have a Valorant team and a FIFA team and like a Fortnite player. So there you go. Bunch of esports nobody gives a fuck about except for Valorant. Valorant's pretty good.
I could, man. I hate the sports games, man. I hate FIFA. I used to play so much
You're a
NHL.
sports guy though.
I just those games are so boring. Like I used to play so much NHL, man. We're talking like NHL '06, like way back in the day. And then I found PC games and I was like, why did I play NHL so goddamn much? But to each their own. To each their own. Hey, you like FIFA? Knock yourself out. Play all the fucking FIFA you want.
I'm trying to think.
Uh
I think a 13 like 2K12 or 2K13 was like a good sports game. I think it was 2K12. I played the shit out of that game, dude. Oh my god, 2K was so much back in the day.
I actually think you're gonna really not like this, but I actually thought the baseball games were sick. MLB
Never
The Show
played it.
was
Probably
freaking
is absolute
awesome.
dog shit.
I knew- MLB The Show was
Miss me with that.
freaking dog, man. No, that one was actually really good. But anyways, I gotta let that stuff go because the sports games are pretty trash in my opinion nowadays. Anyways, I think that's it, right? I can wrap up the show.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I guess we didn't do any shoutouts in the middle of the show, so I'll do them now. Remember to hit the subscribe button as I always remind you, and I will keep drilling that into your guys' heads. We love you guys for keeping on coming back, and hope you guys keep enjoying the LCS as we do. This has been episode 75 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We will be back next week. Goodbye.